Welcome back to another episode of the Rise Overrun podcast. I'm Doug Barnett. I'm here with my co-founder, Brant Choate.
How's it going?
One thing, if you're careful, and you might notice, we have 2 cups on the table today. These are not cans. A very significant milestone has happened here at Remy where we have a fountain soda machine.
You've been dreaming of this for...
I know people are like, well, what are the key milestones for Remy? And they're always like revenue or employees. No, man. The day we got the fountain drinks, that is a very, very significant up level in the quality of my life. And I'm very happy about it. So maybe that's why we'll have a little pep in our step on this podcast. Today, we want to talk about what is the correct way to manage? Is it like, I'm going to go with my gut and my intuition, or am I going to anchor on this data that's driving my decision making? If I just think about my day yesterday, and look, I'm a CEO, so that requires inherently in the job title, requires you to be able to make decisions. And you're asked to make decisions. I don't know what the number of decisions I make on a daily basis are around Remy, but the number is not a small number as far as, in the little details. And then maybe per week or per month, a handful of very, very large decisions need to be made that are important. And let me give you an example, just to give the audience some example, a very clear, specific example of how to maybe begin to parse this. In August of 2023, Remy was just a very, very small company. We had 7 people at this time. We made the decision, we had, I don't call it dozens of customers, enterprise partners on our platform. We made the decision to jettison all of them in exchange for 1 customer. Now, that was a very large customer, a very important, the number 1 customer in the space that we could have landed. Mm-hmm. But it was one of those decisions where if you get it wrong, you probably just bet the entire company.
Yeah.
And thinking about how do you reason through decisions like this is what we want to talk about today. How to build your intuition and your gut, when to use data, etc. So to kick this off, Brant, is you think about someone like completely separated from your day-to-day job and what you have to think about, and then they begin to get a little glimpse into what that looks like. Like, how do these questions begin to take shape that people ask you around, like, how do you think about this framework?
I mean, it's normally comes in and like, they'll maybe get a glimpse at my calendar, or they get some maybe like glimpse at a computer screen I'm working on or something. And it if you were to see my calendar, it's like triple booked all day long, more or less. And it kind of just looks like a disaster. My to-do lists are long with all kinds of stuff. For maybe like someone outside of this world, it just looks like chaos, and there's no possible way that, one person can sort of make sense of this much stuff once. And so, yeah, it's kind of what we'll dive into here, but you have to develop a way to make that happen. I kind of look at it as like my core value set. Like, how do you span across many disciplines at once with competency, believability when you come with decisions such that, dozens and hundreds in the future of people will actually want to do what you think is the right thing to do.
So let's talk about developing this intuition. I think about this now, even as it relates to, well, let's just stay on calendar for a minute. You and I manage our calendars in a very, very different way. Like, it maybe is impossible to manage them more differently. And it gets back into like having a system that works for you, that you can ingest information in such a way. And in this scenario, my calendar is mostly empty. You're like, well, how is that possible? You're the CEO. One of the core things that I have to have in my role, and also just generally for my happiness, is I need time to think. And I've been in a situation where my calendar was just very, very full all the time. And it didn't give me the ability to like really think about the highest and best use of my time. And in many scenarios, although I have to make many decisions every day, most of those decisions are like snap. Like I don't even need to think about it. I know what I'm going to do beforehand. But it comes from this preparation time that I spend thinking about the business, looking at data, informing my decisions so that I don't have to see the data in order to make the decision here. So maybe just give people some perspective on how you begin to just take all of these disparate pieces of information that begin to flow in through meetings, through data, through review of work, et cetera. How do you begin to architect your days?
For me, it's like a step removed, and this is hard to do at a very early stage company, but this concept of having clarity around different levels of strategy in the company is like fundamental to how I think about it. So from the very beginning of Remy, we've sat down and had conversations like, what's the purpose of Remy? Like, what are, like, with this idea with roofing, like, what's our mission? How would we describe in one sentence? Like, why do we exist? What does good look like if we, go after this mission? And getting like layers more specific. So you might go up into something like, okay, like what's our strategy for making this mission happen? Like we want to modernize roofing. Like what are we actually going to go do? Some of the decisions that we've made strategically there, it's like, focus on smaller number of customer, go after solar, just like ways to narrow the focus, I think is essentially what strategy is. And then that turns into projects that like shoot up the other end. Like, how do we really support one huge enterprise company versus lots of smaller ones? What are the projects that are necessary to go do that? Well, we need to build like our own software that supports very complex workflows. We need to get SOC 2 compliant. We have to kind of do all these different things that like are supporting this area of focus. And then for me, I kind of know that like, okay, now I'm in like a weekly view. I'm going to just do things that support this focus that we've created for ourselves and make sure that I have ways to kind of know along the way, week by week, if we're like on track or off track. Those are some of the high level thoughts about how I organize my time.
So to distill it down, maybe to something that people can go research on their own, that has been very helpful for us, that I'd like to have you actually speak on is, and I actually don't know if Lenny came up with this, but it is through Lenny Rachitsky that we learned about this pyramid of clarity, and giving people some like, okay, you're not a founder, you're not the CEO, whatever, but you can actually take this framework of thinking and have it apply to really any job.
Yep.
So you want to walk people through what that looks like?
Yeah, I like touched on it a tiny bit, but I think Asana came up with this. I could be wrong there, but I know Lenny didn't. And basically the concept is for a company, you have a foundational layer of a pyramid that is the mission. And above that, you have the vision. So the vision is like, what happens if the mission is true? And then above that, you have strategy. So it's like, what actions are we going to take in some time period is maybe a way to think about it to make.
What trade-offs are we going to make, basically?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And then you're just kind of like getting smaller and smaller. And so, the tip of this might be something like roadmap or tasks or projects that the teams will actually do in any given week or quarter. Having that spelled out is the pyramid of clarity.
As you think about, okay, mission, vision, and then strategy. And then really what you get into then above strategy is execution. I just want to stick on this strategy layer just for a second here, because there's some really interesting things that have happened at Remy that I wouldn't have predicted based on prior strategic decisions that we've made. And I think giving people specific examples to maybe go think through or reason through how this, maybe they can go back and take a retrospective on that will help them inform the way that they think about this moving forward. So we're going to go back to this decision to go focus on one customer 18 months ago. This customer is very large, the very largest in their space, the best in their space, and we had no business winning that agreement. And in fact, the fact that we had the chance to win the contract and then decided to win the contract, and then us deciding there is simply no other way that we can execute on this agreement unless we just focus. Well, now we are expanding into a new area of the business, completely different channel. And in this space, the top 25 players own 80% of the market, and the top 10 players own 60% of the market. And we are winning some of the top players. And interestingly enough, people that are unfamiliar with some of the details of our business tell us to go win the long tail. Go win some of the small ones so that you can earn the right to work with the large ones. Well, what's been true, and I would not have predicted this 18 months ago, we did earn the right to work with the large ones because we already chose 18 months ago to do that. And now the numbers that we're talking about from a quantity of work, the savings that we're providing the customer, like the value creation that we're giving back to them, is of a scale that the large customers are actually very, very interested in working with us. And I would not have predicted that 18 months ago as an outcome. That's a very happy outcome that I would not have known about. And so downstream of these strategic decisions that you make, there is unknown consequences that you don't know, both good and bad, and there are loads of bad consequences that come from choosing one customer. One of them being most venture capital funds don't want to talk to you because of this concentration risk that you have. And thinking about this strategy layer and about taking outside roofing and our roles as founders, stripping all of that away, and thinking about the strategic decision that you're going to make today. What data do you have to inform that decision, and what trade-offs are you making? Most people don't want to talk about the trade-offs that you're making, but you're making them regardless, even if you're not willing to acknowledge them. And this little thing, if you just think about this strategy layer, is a very interesting way to begin to tune your intuition and like how you think about this stuff. Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I think most of having success across like a lot of, disciplines or a lot of topics, I think does come into narrowing your focus. And I almost kind of have this like system that works for me, and I create these like buckets in my mind, and I even like write these down from time to time. And it more or less is just like, here are all the areas that I kind of want to like either gather information about, listen to podcasts about, like think about, and I'm like narrowing my focus about what I consume information about. And
can you give people some specific things that you've done?
Yeah.
Because I know what these are, but I think they would help.
Yeah, so like said another way, I'm curating an information diet. So there are times, and this time that we're in is one of them, where I will just like remove myself from social media. I find that for me, there's a lot of like groupthink, there's a lot of like discussion around things that I frankly just don't need in my mind floating around. Whether that's like the latest drama with Elon Musk or what's going on in the Trump administration. For what I'm like trying to think about right now in our business, I kind of know what these like buckets are, and I just want to like consume information about those things. And you could say like, okay, it's like narrow-minded, you're gonna miss some information about AI or whatever, but I just have like proactively set aside things that I think matter and I think I have a good sense of. And I still, for example, have a podcast I listen to about like world news. I actually feel like very tuned into what's going on. I have podcasts I listen to about AI. I want to make sure that I understand what's going on there. It's just like a bit more proactivity around media that I consume, more or less. And then even just having these buckets like in my notes, it gives me a place to just like gather things under titles. And over some time, you kind of end up with links, books, whatever, that you can like actually go read and make sense of. And you're not leaving all of your like information diet choices up to algorithms.
So I want to give maybe some of the ways that I think about this on the information diet side. If you go look at my Twitter feed, which I have been a daily user of Twitter for more than 15 years, long time. I literally don't have another social media account. I don't look at Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I had at some point some TikTok. I quickly removed it from my life because I was like, oh, this is just trash TV, essentially. This is not helping. I think I follow, in 15 years, you would think that I have a massive number of accounts that are in my following. I think I follow just over 100, and it is a very quick unfollow if I believe it does not fit into this narrow framework of what I'm trying to get out of the product. And there really are two core lanes that I'm looking for from that. One is, as it relates to business, builders. I don't want media. I don't want analysts. In fact, I don't want VCs. I want people who are in the arena building. And if you look at the people that I follow there, that is the core demographic, are people that are doing the job. I want to listen to what they have to say about general trends that are going on in things that are relevant to my job. But then the other side of it is basketball. And the entire purpose of the people that I follow in that area is entertainment. And one of the mistakes that I see people make on an information diet perspective is there are business-focused podcasts that look like business podcasts that are actually entertainment.
Most of them.
Most of them. And being able to discern the difference as it relates to your job, the difference between something that's there to entertain you, that I use to entertain me, and or something that is there to inform me and educate me, I think people get wrong a lot.
You could say the same thing about most Twitter accounts that are business, any form of media. I think even like media that feels a little more rigid, like CNBC is a great example. Most of it is actually just entertainment. It's not information dense. All the talking head stuff is taken over, whatever. I just think, I think it's a good point. And it's hard to know, especially if you're like, young in your career, what's what. I think, you and I will have this experience a lot where like young people will come up to us and be like, oh, you should go on this podcast, or you guys should like work with this company. And they're these entertainment focused things. And we're just like, okay. Not exactly like the audience we're going after. Anyways, I think even like there's some nuance to this information diet thing for me, and that like I'm going like, cold turkey now for a reason. I've spent lots of time on Twitter in the past with these people you're talking about, using them as like a sense-making apparatus.
Yep.
I just kind of feel for right now that like, I don't know, I've taken a lot of that away over time. I don't need the like constant reinforcement of like the same fundamental principles of how to succeed in business. Like they haven't changed in hundreds of years probably. Yep. So like I know what it is. I have other ways to make sense of the trends. And I'm just wanting to put my head down on like a narrow set of topics and span across as much in our business as possible without lots of extra going on.
I want to give one more example to this because, of course, there is nuance in all things. But the way that I think about this, which I'm not even saying is right, I'm just telling you how I think. When it comes to business news and really analysis of what's happening, I don't subscribe to the Wall Street Journal or any other real publication that is focused on what I would call driving eyeballs, like mass eyeballs are required. Instead, the only really source that I use here is I could read Stratechery, which is made by Ben Thompson. Ben Thompson was at Microsoft and then decided to open this basically before Substack existed, this like boutique service around tech analysis. Why is that the one? Well, one, I think he is the single best in the whole world at this stuff on analyzing tech, which I want to know about. And most of what he's talking about is not really relevant to my day-to-day at Remy, but it gives me a very, very clear architecture of what's going on generally in technology, specifically like chip manufacturing, what's happening with AI, what is happening with the Mag 7 in the stock market, what's happening in the stock market generally, what's happening in the entertainment industry, that's giving me what I would call broad strokes. So it's not that I'm against analysis, it's just that I want to curate very, very carefully with real thought about what I'm listening to and why. And I think that's probably the key thing that I would say on this information diet is a lot of people is like garbage in. And there's a lot of ways to do this. One of those, I'm going to get off social media. I'm going to completely purge it. That doesn't mean everybody should just purge social media. It just means you've got to be thoughtful about what you're putting into your system every day, and that's giving you the analysis that you need to do to begin to tune your intuition so that when it's time to make decisions, the right information is flowing around in your head.
Yeah, like another, I don't know, maybe sort of weird thing that I started doing is I wanted to have points of reference about what it was like to build a company across like as many different phases of the business as possible. And I've been through this before, but I didn't want to just have like just one point of reference, like helped scale Podium. Thus, I'm going to always see it through that lens. And so I started looking for basically like biographies about how businesses were created. And I listened to like 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes longer, just before I go to bed. It's like how I fall asleep now at this point. And I get just enough in that 10 minutes where I can remember it and I'm not too sleepy. But over the course of a year, I go through dozens of these things. And, now at this point, I've gone through like really like any major big tech company you can think of. I've gone through a lot of like ones that are actually old and have like kind of started to fizzle. Media companies like the story of LucasArts, Disney, all kinds of different angles. And I feel like over time it has like created this almost like gut feeling about what's normal. Do other companies go through this? Like how important really is this given decision? It feels really important, but like in the grand scheme of things, is it? That I don't know how I would have got any other way. And it's not that all of these companies are like objectively right, but I think in the aggregate, consuming the stories of like 100 companies, you get some triangulation.
I hope people just listen to that. 10 minutes a day. How many books did you really listen to last year? It was over 60, right?
Yeah, 62.
Yeah, like over 60 books. Just very little inches at a time over a long period of time adds up to a lot of learning that people can go get. It's like, I just think about my kids through the lens of education right now on things like this. There is so much incredible education that's basically free.
Yeah.
I mean, how much is an Audible subscription? $10 a month?
Yeah.
YouTube, I mean, for $30 a month, relative to tuition, if you think about it through the lens of that versus tuition, it is so unbelievable how much you can learn if you'll just dedicate a little bit of time every single day focused on this thing that we're like, is this entertainment for me, or is this what I want to put into my brain to really like consider and think about? And over time, it really adds up. So separate from the information diet, I really do think putting yourself in positions that are uncomfortable for you is the next thing that I would put here, which is like thinking about what your job is today, what you do today, and are you in the right spot professionally? And by spot, I mean the actual job itself. You know, we interviewed one of our employees where he just said, he's like, I was bored because I was the most ambitious person at the company. So he made a change. The reason that this is important as it relates to like building intuition versus data always is if you're putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, you are requiring yourself to be curious and to learn about new situations. And the more of those that you can see over time, the better you're going to get at thinking through this thing that you just said about other companies. Like, is this really that important? Or is it like, there's like a 50-50 and it's really not that high of impact here? But if you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again every day, you're just not going to give yourself that chance.
Yeah, I think like said another way, it's really hard for humans to manufacture urgency. So I don't know. This comes up all the time with early founders where they're like, should I bootstrap or should I go like the fundraising route? I'm like, well, I think like 0.001% of humans can make sense of how to do bootstrapping because of this. Basically, you're saying, I'm going to work on a project on the side, and normally they have a job that's paying them 150 grand plus a year. They don't have any real urgency in their life. They just kind of want to do a startup for whatever reason. And
they're bored
and whatever. Why are you going to like put yourself through all of this if you don't have to? And so like the I don't know, the alternative way is quit your job. Everyone all of a sudden knows you've quit your job, and then you have, I don't know, a time limit until you run out of money.
Yep.
You have to figure it out.
Either your own or someone else's.
Yeah.
Yep.
You have to figure it out. You have to figure out how to like get to the first milestone of raising a pre-seed. Then so on and so on and so on. So like you do that enough, I think this does become more habitual. For me to just like, I don't know, invoke curiosity feels natural at this point. It's whether I had this job or not, I would be doing these same things. But I think shifting your mindset into this does require what you're saying. You have to like push yourself, put yourself in uncomfortable situations, and like have those situations force you to stretch.
Okay. A little bit of a quicker discussion topic today. Hopefully some of this stuff about information diet, curiosity, some of the choices that you're making, enable people to begin to like think through this whole like, okay, I have this pyramid of clarity we've talked about. I've got this, I got to start with like mission. Even if it's on this very, very narrow thing that you're trying to go solve, what is the point? And then work your way up from there on how to go execute against it and begin to build that intuition. So hopefully you got some value out of this, and we will see you guys on the flip.
See ya.